You won't believe what happened when she gave away her last dollar. What is the true value of a single dollar? For most, it's almost nothing, a pack of gum, maybe half a cup of coffee. But what if that dollar, given away when you had almost nothing yourself, was actually a key to an entirely different universe? This story will shock you. This is the story of Isabella Martinez, a waitress drowning in debt and despair, working endless shifts at a Greasy Spoon diner in downtown Houston. It's the story of a forgotten old man with nothing but a threadbare coat and secrets in his tired eyes. And it's the story of one cup of coffee, an act of kindness so small it should have been forgotten. But instead, it changed everything. The Sunrise Diner was less a place of culinary delight and more a museum of shattered dreams. It smelled perpetually of stale coffee, sizzling bacon grease, and the faint sweet scent of bleach fighting a losing battle against time. For Isabella Martinez, this place was both her prison and her only lifeline. And she had no idea her life was about to explode. At 24, her existence was a tightrope walk over a canyon of debt. Her dreams of becoming a graphic designer were gathering dust in a portfolio under her bed. Reality was different, the art of balancing trays of steaming plates, of smiling through exhaustion, and of calculating tips down to the last cent. Every penny was a soldier in a war she was losing. Every single cent mattered. Every dollar was ammunition in the war to keep her and her younger brother Miguel afloat. Miguel was the sun Isabella orbited around. At 14, he should have been worried about video games and soccer practice. Instead, his world had shrunk to the sterile white walls of Children's Hospital. What happened next will break your heart. A rare genetic disorder was methodically, cruelly shutting down his organs. The treatments were experimental, devastatingly expensive, and barely covered by their pathetic insurance. So Isabella worked double shifts, picked up holiday hours, and wore a smile as brittle as spun glass while her heart felt like lead. But she was about to meet someone who would change everything. This Thursday morning started like any other nightmare. The morning rush had been a blur of impatient construction workers and zombified office drones. Now, in the mid-morning lull, Isabella leaned against the counter, rereading a text from the hospital's billing department. Payment overdue. Please remit $3,247 immediately to avoid service interruption. Service interruption. They made it sound like Netflix. Daydreaming again, Martinez? Isabella jumped, stuffing her phone back into her apron pocket. Sandra, her cynical co-worker, was wiping down the counter. Just checking the time, Isabella lied. Right. We've got another lost soul. This lost soul was about to become the most important person in her life. An old man stood hesitantly just inside the doorway, as if unsure whether he belonged. He was painfully thin, his frame lost inside a tweed overcoat frayed at the cuffs. His gray hair was unkempt, and his face was a roadmap of deep wrinkles. But it was his eyes that stopped Isabella cold. Those eyes held a secret that would change everything. They were pale, washed-out blue, cloudy with age, and they held profound weariness that seemed to suck light from the room. He clutched a worn flat cap in trembling hands as he shuffled toward the counter. Isabella grabbed a menu and water, placing them in front of him with her practiced smile. Welcome to Sunrise Diner. Can I start you with something to drink? His next words would haunt her forever. The old man blinked as if her voice had pulled him from a great distance. Coffee, he rasped, his voice thin and dry like rustling leaves. Just coffee. Black. Isabella poured the dark liquid into a thick ceramic mug. He wrapped his gnarled hands around it, letting warmth seep into his bones. He didn't look at the menu, just stared into the black depths, lost in a world only he could see. What happened next will shock you. For nearly an hour, he sat there taking slow, infrequent sips. Other customers came and went, screaming children. Arguing couples, busy businessmen. Through it all, the old man remained a silent statue. Then disaster struck. Finally, he drained the last of his coffee. He fumbled in his coat pockets, panic growing on his weathered face. He checked his trouser pockets, movements becoming frantic. "Is everything all right, sir?" Isabella asked gently. He looked up, pale eyes wide with crushing embarrassment. I seem to have misplaced my wallet. I'm so sorry. I thought I had a few dollars." His voice cracked with shame. What Sandra said next was brutal. Sandra, overhearing from the grill, scoffed loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Yeah, right. That's what they all say." Isabella shot Sandra a glare before turning back to the man. She saw the deep flush of shame on his wrinkled cheeks, the way his shoulders slumped in defeat. In his humiliation, she saw a reflection of her own constant fear. Her next decision changed everything. Her own problems felt crushing, Miguel's medical bills, the rent, the endless debt. But this man's acute shame felt more immediate. "Don't you worry about it," she said softly, reaching for the check. It was for $1.75. "It's on the house today." You won't believe his reaction. The man looked stunned. "Oh, no. I couldn't possibly." "Please," Isabella insisted, giving him her first genuine smile of the day. "It's just a cup of coffee. Consider it a gift." She crumpled the check and tossed it in the trash. Then she opened her own worn wallet, pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills from her tip money, and rang up the sale herself. What he did next will give you chills. The old man didn't thank her immediately. He just stared with an expression she couldn't read. The panic in his eyes had been replaced by something else, a quiet, intense scrutiny that made her skin prickle. "Thank you," he finally whispered, his voice thick with emotion she couldn't identify. "You are very kind." He gave a small formal nod and walked slowly toward the door, the bell tinkling softly in his wake. She had no idea she had just passed the most important test of her life. What happened next will leave you speechless. The following week was a slow-motion catastrophe. The hospital wasn't just sending bills, they were calling, voices a practiced blend of synthetic sympathy and iron demand. The landlord had slipped a notice under her door, fluorescent pink paper screaming her failure. It wasn't an eviction notice yet, but a final warning, 2 words that felt like a punch to the gut. Isabella's world was collapsing, and she had no idea salvation was watching. The cracks in Isabella's carefully constructed dam were widening. She took on more shifts until exhaustion became normal. Her world blurred into taking orders, refilling coffees, and the endless smell of maple syrup. The smiles she gave customers felt heavier, the friendly chatter more forced. Her mind was constant calculation, bills owed versus tips earned, a race she was perpetually losing. Then he came back. During a brutal Thursday lunch rush, the bell tinkled, and there he was again. The same old man in the same threadbare coat, looking just as lost and weary. He shuffled to the same stool, cloudy blue eyes scanning until they landed on her. A flicker of something, recognition, purpose, passed through them. His eyes were watching everything. "Coffee, please," he rasped, voice frail as ever. "Black." Isabella's heart did a strange flutter. Sandra rolled her eyes dramatically. "Your boyfriend's back," she stage whispered. "Hope you're ready to open your wallet again." What he did next was extraordinary. Isabella poured the coffee, placing it before him with a tired smile. "Good to see you again." The man nodded, his gaze fixed on her with unsettling intensity. He was studying her every move. During the lunch rush, she noticed he was watching everything. He watched her handle a belligerent customer claiming his bacon was too crispy, patiently taking the plate back without argument. He watched her kneel to help a mother collect scattered crayons. He watched her share quiet words with Mrs. Patterson, an elderly regular who always ate alone. Then came the real test. When the rush subsided, he called her over, voice barely a whisper. "Miss," he said, looking down with genuine distress. "I seem to have done something clumsy." He gestured to the floor. The sugar dispenser lay on its side, white crystals scattered across grimy linoleum like tiny diamonds. "Oh heavens, I'm so sorry," he mumbled, face coloring with shame. "My hands, they don't always listen anymore." Her response would determine her entire future. Sandra sighed audibly. For crying out loud. Isabella's back ached. Her feet screamed in worn-out sneakers. The last thing she wanted was to clean up sticky mess. Irritation flashed through her. Why now? Why him? But what she did next was extraordinary. Then she saw his face, genuine distress in his eyes, tremor in his hands as he tried uselessly to scoop sugar. Her anger died instantly. This wasn't malice. This was mortality, the quiet, clumsy indignity of a body betraying its owner. "Please don't worry about it," she said, voice softening. "It happens to the best of us. It's just sugar." She had no idea he was testing her. She grabbed a dustpan and brush. As she knelt on dirty floor, sweeping granules, she felt his intense gaze boring into her. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was analytical, penetrating, as if he were looking through her soul. When she stood up, he cleared his throat deliberately. "I must pay for the sugar and coffee," he said, pulling out handful of change. He carefully counted it onto the counter, 97 cents. "What happened next will make you cry." "It's all I have today," he said, gaze dropping to pathetic pile of coins. "I can come back with the rest. I promise." The coffee cost $1.75. Sandra stared with smug, "I told you so," expression. This was it. The moment to cut him off, to protect what little she had. It was sensible. Isabella's choice shocked everyone. Isabella looked at the pathetic coins. She looked at his worn-out shoes held together with duct tape. She thought of the pink notice on her refrigerator and Miguel's mounting medical bills. Every instinct screamed to say no, to protect herself. Instead, she pushed the coins back toward him. "You keep that," she said quietly. "You might need it for bus fare." She took out her battered wallet and paid for his coffee again, movements quick and decisive. "This one's on me too. Don't worry about the sugar. His reaction will give you chills." The old man didn't thank her. He just stared with cloudy eyes that suddenly seemed to clear, revealing startling, sharp intelligence. He slowly scooped coins back into his pocket, gaze never leaving her face. "Why?" he asked, voice suddenly stronger, less raspy. Isabella was taken aback by the directness. "Why what? Why do you do this?" he pressed. "You work for tips. You cannot afford to give away your earnings." It wasn't a question, it was a statement hitting too close to home. Her answer changed everything. "My mother always said you don't measure your wealth by what you have, but by what you can give away," Isabella heard herself saying. It was something her mom used to say before she got sick and passed away, leaving Isabella to care for Miguel. And sometimes a cup of coffee is more than just a cup of coffee. What he did next will haunt you. The man's expression softened completely. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, as if she had just confirmed a long-held hypothesis. He stood up with movements steadier than she'd ever seen, placed his worn cap on his head, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned back one final time. "I will not forget this, Isabella Martinez," he said, voice clear and firm. Isabella froze. He knew her full name. She always wore a name tag, but he said it with such purpose, such finality, as if memorizing it for something monumentally important. Before she could ask how he knew her last name, he was gone, leaving her with his words echoing in her mind and a growing sense that something extraordinary had just occurred. She had no idea the test was over, and she had passed. For 2 days after the $1.75 transaction, the old man did not appear. Isabella found herself scanning the door every time the bell tinkled. Anxiety and regret tightening in her stomach. Sandra was merciless. "So, has Grandpa Moneybags returned with your fortune yet?" she'd sneer. Or did he take a trip to Vegas on your grocery money? Isabella had no defense. She felt like the biggest fool alive. The act that had felt defiant now just felt monumentally stupid. The $1.75 had become a symbol of her foolishness, a reminder that kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had to borrow money from a fellow waitress just to put gas in her car to visit Miguel, a humiliation that stung more than Sandra's taunts. Then everything changed on day 3. On the third day, a Saturday, a new presence made itself felt. He was the polar opposite of the shabby old man who had consumed Isabella's thoughts. He arrived before lunch rush, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Isabella made in 6 months. His shoes were polished to mirror shine, reflecting fluorescent lights like black diamonds. This man radiated power and mystery. He was perhaps late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an air of quiet authority utterly out of place among sticky tabletops and chipped coffee mugs. He chose a booth in the far corner, the exact same one the old man had occupied on his last visit. The coincidence sent chills down Isabella's spine. What he did next was absolutely bizarre. He requested black coffee and a menu, but Isabella noticed he never opened it. Instead, he opened a leather-bound portfolio and appeared to be reading, but his eyes were rarely on the page. They were scanning the room, observing staff, taking in every detail of the diner's rhythm. More than once, Isabella felt his gaze linger on her with unsettling intensity. It wasn't just watching, it was studying. It wasn't lecherous or casual interest. It was something else, cool, detached, analytical. The look of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope, cataloging behavior and reactions. Isabella felt paranoid unease. Was he a health inspector? A corporate scout? Or worse, was he from the landlord's agency, sent to verify she was still employed before finalizing eviction? Her mind raced through terrifying possibilities. The man stayed for hours, nursing that single coffee with surgical precision. Occasionally he would ask for refills, paying with crisp $20 bills, telling Isabella to keep the change with polite but impersonal nods. The tips were more than she sometimes made in an hour, but they felt strangely sterile, transactions devoid of real human connection. Sandra was fascinated by this mysterious customer. "Now that's the kind of customer you should focus on," she whispered. "Looks like old money. Probably a lawyer or banker. Go flash him that smile. Maybe he'll leave you his inheritance." But Isabella couldn't. The man's presence was too unnerving, too calculated. It felt like he was waiting for something specific. Then the moment of truth arrived. The lunch rush came and went like a hurricane. The afternoon settled into usual quiet lull. The man remained a silent, watchful sentinel, his presence a constant low-level hum of anxiety in Isabella's mind. She found herself being overly meticulous, wiping spotless counters, double-checking orders, forcing her smile brighter than usual, all under his quiet, penetrating gaze. What happened at 3 p.m. changed everything. Around 3 o'clock, the bell tinkled softly. Isabella's head snapped up, heart lurching with familiar, foolish hope. But it wasn't the old man. It was a young mother with 2 rambunctious children immediately clamoring for milkshakes and fries. Isabella's disappointment was crushing. As she took their order, her shoulders slumped with disappointment she wouldn't admit to anyone. She had been hoping, against all logic, to see those cloudy blue eyes and threadbare coat again. As she turned to input the order, she glanced at the man in the corner. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression, but as their eyes met, he gave her the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. That nod sent shivers down her spine. It wasn't friendly. It felt like acknowledgement, a signal that some silent observation had been concluded. Some invisible test administered and graded. Minutes later, as Isabella was at the milkshake machine, the man stood up with fluid, purposeful movements. He was leaving, but something felt wrong. He left another generous tip, adjusted his suit jacket with military precision, and walked toward the front. Isabella expected him to leave, to disappear into Houston heat. Instead, he paused by the cash register, waiting with the patience of someone accustomed to being obeyed. What he said next stopped her heart. When she finished serving milkshakes and made her way to the register, the man waited patiently. When his turn came, he didn't present a check. He simply looked at her with those sharp, calculating eyes and asked a question that made her blood run cold. "Are you Isabella Martinez?" The way he said her name made her skin crawl. His voice was deep and resonant, a boardroom voice that commanded attention. It had no place in a greasy Houston diner, yet here it was, cutting through ambient noise like a blade. Isabella's throat went dry. "Yes," she managed to whisper, her voice sounding thin and terrified. "Can I help you? What happened next will haunt your dreams." He didn't smile or offer reassurance. Instead, he reached into his expensive suit jacket with deliberate, almost theatrical slowness. He produced a slim, elegant business card case made of genuine leather. With his thumb, he slid out a single card and placed it on the counter between them with the precision of a chess master making a winning move. The card changed everything. The card was thick, creamy stock that felt expensive. The lettering was embossed in deep navy blue, catching harsh fluorescent lights. Thomas Harrison, Senior Counsel, Sterling Industries. Below the name was an address in Houston's most prestigious downtown financial district and a phone number that screamed power and influence. Isabella's world tilted on its axis. Sterling Industries. The name hit her like a physical blow. It was a titan, a multinational conglomerate with tentacles reaching into everything from technology and pharmaceuticals to global logistics. Its founder and CEO, William Sterling, was a reclusive, semi-legendary figure, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the entire world. What could they possibly want with a waitress? "Mr. Sterling would like to request a meeting with you," Harrison said, his tone flat and professional as granite. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., at the address on the card." Isabella's mind was a maelstrom of confusion and terror. William Sterling? The billionaire? Why? "I don't understand," she stammered, voice cracking. "Why? What is this about?" His response was terrifying in its simplicity. Harrison's expression remained completely unchanged, not a flicker of emotion crossed his features. "All questions will be answered at the meeting," he said with mechanical precision. "We are prepared to compensate you for your time away from work." He paused, gaze unwavering. "And I would advise you not to be late. Mr. Sterling does not appreciate tardiness." Without another word, he turned and vanished. Before Isabella could ask another question, Harrison walked out with the same purposeful stride that had brought him in. He left her standing there, trembling, holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Tomorrow would change her life forever. The next morning, Isabella stood on a rain-slicked marble plaza, staring up at a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the gray Houston sky like a needle through fabric. The words, "Sterling Tower," were carved in massive, severe letters above revolving glass doors that reflected her small, trembling figure back at her. This was the address from the card. It felt less like a building and more like a monument to power she'd never comprehend. She was about to enter another universe. She had spent a sleepless night tossing and turning, her mind a frantic battlefield of speculation and terror. She'd called the diner and begged for the morning off, offering to work a double shift the next day to make up for it. Her manager, swayed by the desperation in her voice, had reluctantly agreed. What she was about to discover would shatter her reality. Now, standing at the foot of this glass and steel behemoth, she felt a crippling wave of imposter syndrome wash over her like ice water. She was wearing her best and only interview outfit, a simple black skirt and a slightly faded blue blouse she'd ironed 3 times that morning. She felt like a stray cat that had wandered into a palace. Every person who swept past her radiated wealth and purpose. Their expensive suits and leather briefcases were a stark contrast to her worn handbag and scuffed shoes. Taking a deep, shaky breath that tasted of exhaust and anxiety, she pushed through the revolving doors into a lobby so vast and silent it felt like stepping into a cathedral. The opulence was overwhelming. The floors were polished black granite that reflected her image like dark water. The walls were adorned with enormous abstract paintings that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, and a single, severe-looking receptionist sat behind a desk longer than Isabella's entire apartment. Her heart pounding like a war drum, she approached the intimidating fortress of mahogany and marble. What happened next felt like a dream. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Mr. Sterling." Saying the name out loud felt absurd, like claiming she had dinner plans with the president. The receptionist, a woman with unnervingly perfect hair and makeup, looked up from her computer screen with an expression of cool professional indifference. "Your name?" she asked in a voice that could have cut glass. "Isabella Martinez." The receptionist's reaction was telling. The woman tapped a few keys with manicured nails. Her eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the first crack in her perfect composure. "Ah, yes, Miss Martinez. Mr. Harrison is expecting you. Please take the private elevator on your right. It has been programmed for the penthouse floor." A private elevator. The penthouse floor. The sense of surrealism intensified until Isabella felt like she was walking through honey. She approached a discreet, unmarked steel door that slid open silently as she neared, like it was reading her thoughts. The elevator was lined with dark, polished wood that smelled of money and secrets. It had only one button, a simple, glowing P for penthouse. The ascent felt like traveling to another planet. The rise was unnervingly fast and completely silent. Her ears popped as floors flashed by on a small digital display, 40, 50, 60. The elevator finally stopped at 75 with a soft chime that sounded like expensive crystal. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into a room that stole her breath and held it hostage. This wasn't just an office, it was a kingdom. It was larger than her entire apartment building. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling windows offering a staggering panoramic view of Houston laid out below like a conquered city. The gray clouds that had seemed oppressive from the street were now a dramatic backdrop to absolute power. A massive mahogany desk, clear of clutter except for a sleek laptop, faced the windows like a throne overlooking an empire. James Harrison was waiting, but he wasn't alone. Harrison, the lawyer from the diner, stood waiting in the same impeccable gray suit. But beside him stood another figure, a man who made Isabella's knees nearly buckle. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-60s, with silver hair and an aura of quiet authority that filled the room like electricity. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than Isabella's annual salary. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They were pale, piercing blue, no longer cloudy or weary. They were sharp, clear, focused, and looking directly at her with recognition that made her skin crawl with impossible realization. It was him. It was the old man from the diner. The shabby vagrant was actually the most powerful man in Houston. Transformed, reborn, remade. The threadbare coat was gone, replaced by fine wool worth thousands. The shuffling, hesitant gait was gone, replaced by the confident stride of someone who owned buildings, companies, lives. But the face, the bone structure, the essence, it was unmistakably the same person who had sat at her counter, desperate and grateful for a cup of coffee. Isabella's mind couldn't process what she was seeing. He walked around the massive desk with fluid movements and sat in the leather chair, the entire Houston skyline his backdrop like a painting of conquest. He folded his hands on the polished wood and looked at Isabella with an expression she now recognized, the same analytical gaze she had felt when she was cleaning up sugar, but amplified 100-fold. When he spoke, his voice shattered her reality. "Please, sit down, Miss Martinez," he said, his voice no longer raspy and weak but rich and commanding, the unmistakable baritone of a CEO accustomed to being obeyed without question. Isabella stared, speechless, her mind desperately trying to reconcile the image of the frail, penniless old man with the formidable titan of industry sitting before her. The deception was complete and devastating. The shabby coat, the lost wallet, the spilled sugar, the sob story about not having money, it had all been an elaborate performance, a calculated lie orchestrated by one of the most powerful men in America. A hot wave of humiliation and anger washed over her like lava. She had been played, manipulated, tested like a laboratory rat. Her sympathy, her kindness, her sacrifice, it had all been for the twisted amusement of a bored billionaire. She had given him her last dollars, and it had been a game. She stood abruptly, the leather chair scraping against marble floor. The glass of water Harrison had offered trembled in her hand like her entire world. "You," she whispered, her voice shaking with a volcanic mixture of awe and fury. "It was you all along." His response would change her life forever. The man, William Sterling, one of the richest and most powerful humans on earth, did not flinch from her accusatory stare. He met it head-on with an expression that was calm, almost sad, but completely unrepentant. "Yes, Miss Martinez," said William Sterling, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who controlled billions of dollars and thousands of lives. "It was me. Please sit down. We have a great deal to discuss, and very little time to discuss it. What he said next will blow your mind, what he revealed next will destroy everything you thought you knew." Isabella remained standing, trembling with rage and disbelief. The glass of water sat untouched on the massive desk, condensation forming rings on polished mahogany. "Talk about what?" she demanded, voice shaking like autumn leaves. "How you enjoyed your sick little game. How you got kicks watching the struggling waitress give you her last few dollars. Was my desperation entertaining enough for you?" His response changed everything. William Sterling didn't react with anger or dismissal. He simply gestured to the chair with infinite patience, his pale blue eyes holding something she couldn't identify: regret, sorrow, something deeper. "Please, Isabella, sit," he said, voice carrying quiet authority. "You have every right to be furious. But you have also earned an explanation that will change how you see everything." What he said next shattered her understanding of reality. The quiet sincerity in his voice cut through her rage like a blade through silk. Hesitantly, legs feeling like liquid, she sank back into the plush leather chair. "For the past year," Sterling began, voice calm and measured, "I have been conducting an experiment that was slowly destroying my soul. His next words will break your heart." His gaze drifted to a framed photograph, a black and white image of a vibrant, smiling woman with kind, laughing eyes that seemed to light up the entire frame. "That was my wife, Elena," he said, profound grief softening his powerful features. "She was the heart of my life, my moral compass, my everything. She came from nothing, absolute poverty, and believed in one simple truth that guided every moment of her existence. This truth would change Isabella's life forever. Elena believed that the true measure of a person is revealed not by how they treat those who can help them, but by how they treat someone who can do absolutely nothing for them in return. Someone invisible. Someone powerless." Sterling paused, voice catching slightly. "She lived that truth every single day. When she died 2 years ago, I was left surrounded by people who only showed me kindness because they wanted something from me." The pain in his voice was devastating. Their smiles were transactions. Their concern was calculated. Their kindness always came with invisible price tags. I grew cynical, bitter. I started to believe that the world Elena saw, a world of quiet, selfless decency, had died with her. Isabella felt her anger beginning to dissolve, replaced by something she didn't want to feel: understanding. What he did next was extraordinary. "So I set out to find it," Sterling continued, eyes locking with hers. "I became invisible. A burden. A nobody. I wanted to find one person, just one, who would show genuine kindness without expectation, without knowing who I was." He leaned forward slightly, expression intense. "For 8 months, I wandered through this city. I was ignored, dismissed, treated with contempt. The little charity I received was offered with annoyance, not dignity. Then he found her. Then I walked into your diner, he said, voice dropping to almost a whisper. The first time you paid for my coffee, I was intrigued. It was simple, but you offered it with grace, with genuine human warmth. You didn't just serve me, you saw me. Sterling's eyes never left her face. The second time, I deliberately made things more difficult. I spilled the sugar, expecting irritation. Instead, you knelt on that dirty floor without hesitation, refused my pathetic pocket change, and shared wisdom your mother had given you. He had been testing her all along. I started to hope, he admitted, voice thick with emotion. But I had to be absolutely certain. My faith in human decency was too fragile to risk on assumptions. A wave of shame crossed his features. Forgive me for this, but I had my team investigate your circumstances. I learned about Miguel's condition. I learned about the crushing medical bills, the eviction notices. I knew you were standing on the edge of a financial cliff. What came next was the cruelest test of all. The final test was the most brutal thing I have ever done, Sterling said, voice heavy with self-recrimination. I asked a drowning woman to give away her life vest. I knew you needed that $1.75 more than you needed your next breath. Isabella's throat tightened as the full weight of her sacrifice hit her. A part of me expected you to say no, he continued. To finally prove my cynical theory right, to confirm that Elena's worldview was naive fantasy. But she had done the impossible. But you didn't, Sterling said, voice filled with awe. You looked at what you believed was my desperate need, and you responded with pure compassion. At your absolute lowest point, when you had nothing left to give, you chose to give anyway. He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the silent room. You didn't just give me coffee and money, Isabella. You gave me back the world my wife believed in. You proved that her light hadn't gone out after all. What happened next changed her life forever. Sterling composed himself and slid a thick, leather-bound document across the desk. The folder was embossed with gold lettering. The Elena Sterling Foundation for Compassionate Care. This search wasn't just for my own peace of mind, he said, tapping the document with reverence. It was to find the right person to carry forward my wife's legacy. For the past year, my lawyers have been structuring something unprecedented, a charitable organization dedicated to finding and helping people who fall through society's cracks. The numbers were incomprehensible. The foundation will be endowed with an initial fund of $500 million, Sterling said, watching her face carefully. Its mission is to provide aid with dignity, to find the invisible people, the one society has forgotten. But the real shock was still coming. Isabella, Sterling said, voice now filled with conviction and hope, I am not offering you charity. I am offering you the opportunity of several lifetimes. I want you to be the executive director of the Elena Sterling Foundation. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You will have unlimited resources, a world-class team, and the power to change countless lives, he continued. Your starting salary will be $300,000 annually. The final gift brought tears to her eyes. And the Foundation's first official act, effective immediately, will be to assume complete responsibility for Miguel's medical care, at any facility in the world you choose, for as long as he needs it. Isabella felt the world tilt beneath her. This couldn't be real. But his eyes told her it was. I'm not offering you a reward, Sterling said gently. I'm offering you a calling. The chance to be Elena's hands in this world, to show the same compassion you showed a stranger to thousands of people who desperately need it. Through her tears, Isabella whispered, yes. The world had just changed forever, what happened next will restore your faith in humanity. Life changed with breathtaking, almost supernatural speed. The moment Isabella accepted the position, the vast, efficient machinery of Sterling Industries swept into action like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of power and purpose. Within 24 hours, a team of world-class specialists was reviewing Miguel's case with the intensity of generals planning a military campaign. The next day, Isabella found herself by her brother's side on a private medical jet, soaring through clouds toward a renowned treatment facility in Switzerland that she'd only read about in magazines. The constant fear that had haunted her for years simply vanished. The gnawing terror for Miguel's health, that crushing weight that had pressed down on her chest every waking moment, was replaced by the quiet, steady hum of jet engines carrying them toward hope she'd never dared imagine. While she was away, Harrison's legal team quietly erased the shadows of her old life with surgical precision. Her overdue rent was paid in full. Her cramped apartment was settled. When she returned to Houston, it was to a beautiful, secure downtown apartment that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely, someone worthy of such luxury. But before starting her new life, she had one final goodbye to make. She walked into the Sunrise Diner one last time, the familiar smell of grease and stale coffee hitting her like a wave of bittersweet memory. Sandra was at the counter, polishing forks with her customary scowl, the same expression she'd worn every day for the past decade. "Well, look who it is," Sandra said without looking up, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Finally decided to show up for your shift. Where have you been, living it up somewhere fancy?" Isabella's response changed everything. "I came to say goodbye, Sandra," Isabella said calmly, her voice carrying a new confidence that made Sandra's head snap up in surprise. "I've taken another position." Sandra's eyes scanned Isabella's simple but elegant new dress, the subtle gold watch on her wrist, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity instead of desperate exhaustion. "Oh, really?" Sandra said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Let me guess, Mr. Fancy Suit hired you to polish his silverware. I give it a month before you're back here begging for your apron and asking for extra shifts." What Isabella did next left Sandra speechless. Isabella didn't argue or defend herself. She simply placed a white envelope on the counter with the gentleness of someone laying flowers on a grave. "This is for you," she said quietly. Suspicious and scowling, Sandra tore the envelope open with rough fingers. Inside was a cashier's check that made her jaw drop and her cynical mask shatter completely. $25,000. Sandra stared at the check like it was written in a foreign language. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, the sarcasm completely drained from her tone for the first time in years. "My mother used to say that sometimes people are sharp and cruel because the world has been unkind to them," Isabella said softly, her words carrying the wisdom of someone who had been transformed by grace. "I thought it was time the world was a little kinder to you. Take a vacation. Fix your car. Pay off some bills. Just know that things can get better, Sandra. They really can." Sandra's world had just been turned upside down. Isabella turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent diner. Every customer, every cook, every server was staring at the scene unfolding before them like something out of a fairy tale. "But that old man," Sandra called out, her voice trembling with confusion and something that might have been hope. "Who was he really? What happened?" Isabella's answer was perfect. Isabella paused at the door and looked back at her former colleague, who was still staring at the check as if it might disappear at any moment. "He was just a man who needed a cup of coffee," she said with a smile that could have lit up the entire diner. "And sometimes, Sandra, that's all any of us really are." Her new office was a kingdom of purpose. Months later, Isabella's new office occupied the entire 72nd floor of Sterling Tower, with the same breathtaking view of Houston that had once intimidated her. But now, instead of feeling small and insignificant, she felt powerful and purposeful. She had filled the walls not with expensive art, but with photographs that mattered, Miguel smiling in a sunlit Swiss garden, his health restored and his future bright. The faces of the first families helped by the Foundation's groundbreaking initiatives. Children who had been invisible to society but were now thriving under the Foundation's care. She wasn't serving tables anymore, but she was still serving people. Now she was serving them on a scale she could never have imagined, with resources that seemed limitless and a team of brilliant, dedicated professionals who shared her vision of a more compassionate world. Sterling had been a true mentor, guiding her through the complexities of high-stakes philanthropy and international finance, but always trusting the compassionate instincts he had hired her for. She discovered she had a natural gift for cutting through bureaucratic red tape and seeing the human being at the heart of every problem. The Foundation's impact was already changing the world. Under Isabella's leadership, the Elena Sterling Foundation had become a beacon of hope for the forgotten and invisible. They had revolutionized homeless services in 12 major cities, created groundbreaking medical assistance programs, and established educational scholarships for children who had been written off by society. One afternoon, Sterling visited her office with a surprise. He walked in carrying two simple, thick ceramic mugs, the kind from the Sunrise Diner. He handed one to her, filled with black coffee that smelled like memory and transformation. "I thought you might need a break," he said, standing beside her as they looked out over the city that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "The simplicity of your old life? The predictable routine?" Her answer revealed how much she had grown. Isabella thought for a moment, the familiar bitter taste of the coffee awakening memories of exhaustion, fear, and desperation. She remembered the bone-deep tiredness, the constant anxiety, the crushing weight of impossible financial pressure. "I miss some of the people," she admitted honestly. "But I don't miss the desperation. For so long, I believed that my kindness was a weakness, an expense I couldn't afford. That $1.75 I gave you felt like the end of the world, like I was throwing away money I desperately needed." She turned from the window to face him, her eyes clear and filled with a quiet strength that hadn't been there months before. Her final words captured everything. "I was wrong," she said, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who had learned life's most important lesson. "It wasn't an expense. It was the single greatest investment I ever made. That coffee didn't cost me $1.75, it bought me a future I never could have imagined." Sterling smiled, genuine warmth reaching his pale blue eyes. In that shared moment, they weren't a billionaire and his employee, but two people whose lives had been forever changed by the simple, profound belief that true wealth is measured by what we're willing to give away. And the world became a little brighter. 5 years later, the impact will blow your mind. 5 years after that life-changing conversation in Sterling Tower, Isabella Martinez stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, preparing to deliver the keynote address at the Global Summit on Compassionate Leadership. The massive hall was filled with world leaders, philanthropists, and humanitarian activists from every corner of the earth. Her presentation title, "From $1.75 to $500 million, How One Act of Kindness Changed the World." What she had accomplished was beyond anyone's wildest dreams. In the VIP section sat William Sterling, now 68 and serving as Chairman Emeritus of both Sterling Industries and the Elena Sterling Foundation. Beside him was Miguel Martinez, healthy, vibrant, and now 19 years old, studying pre-med at Harvard University with dreams of becoming a pediatric oncologist. The transformation had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. The foundation had become a global force for good. The Elena Sterling Foundation had grown from Isabella's experimental program to an international movement copied by dozens of other organizations worldwide. Harvard Business School now taught a case study called The Martinez Model, while Isabella's book, The Currency of Compassion, had topped bestseller lists for 32 consecutive weeks. "When I paid for that cup of coffee 5 years ago," Isabella began her speech to the hushed assembly, "I thought I was just helping one desperate person. I had no idea I was about to help heal an entire philosophy of human interaction." The statistics she shared were staggering. Under Isabella's visionary leadership, the foundation had directly impacted over 250,000 lives across 6 continents. Employee assistance programs modeled after their initiatives had been implemented by Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Most remarkably, despite initial investor concerns about soft business practices, companies adopting compassionate leadership principles showed 43% higher employee retention and 38% increased productivity. But the numbers only told part of the extraordinary story. The real triumph was in the individual lives transformed. Maria Santos, a homeless veteran in Detroit, had been able to keep her children when the Foundation's emergency housing program gave her stability instead of judgment. Instead of losing 3 kids to the foster system, Maria had become an advocate and was now studying social work. David Chen, a teenager with autism in Seattle, had found meaningful employment after the Foundation's inclusive hiring initiatives gave him a chance. His attention to detail and dedication had made him Employee of the Month 4 times running, proving that different didn't mean less capable. Even Sandra had been transformed. Sandra Morrison, the cynical co-worker from the Sunrise Diner, had used Isabella's $25,000 gift to pay off crushing debt and return to school. She was now a certified addiction counselor, helping people who reminded her of her younger, angrier self. The Foundation taught me that kindness isn't weakness, Sandra had written to Isabella. It's the strongest force in the universe. The ripple effects had spread far beyond their initial vision. Competitors, initially skeptical of the compassionate business model, had been forced to evolve when they couldn't match the Foundation's employee satisfaction and retention rates. The entire landscape of corporate America was shifting toward human-centered policies. Isabella had become one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But the recognition that meant most to her came from an unexpected source, a handwritten letter from an elderly man in Tampa. This letter captured the true essence of their mission. "Dear Miss Martinez," it read. "My granddaughter was battling depression and had lost all hope. Then she saw your story on the news, how kindness can transform everything. She decided to volunteer at our local shelter instead of giving up. Your example saved her life, and now she's helping save others. Thank you for showing us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." Isabella kept that letter in her desk drawer. Next to Miguel's latest medical reports showing him completely cancer-free and thriving. After her UN speech, Isabella and Sterling met privately. That evening, as the lights of Manhattan twinkled below them from Sterling's New York office, the two sat with cups of coffee, still served in simple ceramic mugs from the Houston diner that had changed their lives. "Elena would be proud," Sterling said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "You've become everything she believed humanity could be." Isabella smiled, remembering the scared, desperate waitress she had once been. "I've been thinking about legacy lately," she said. "When I die, I don't want to be remembered as the woman who ran a successful foundation." Her vision for the future was breathtaking. "I want to be remembered as someone who proved that the smallest acts of kindness can reshape the world. That a single dollar given in compassion is worth more than 1,000,000 given for recognition." She gestured toward the city sprawling endlessly below them. "Miguel starts medical school next year. He wants to specialize in treating children who can't afford care. The cycle continues." The Foundation's future was secured. Sterling nodded, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a life's work completed. "The endowment is now at $2.8 billion and growing. The programs will continue long after we're gone." He raised his simple coffee mug. "To Elena's vision, your compassion, and the truth that wealth is measured not by what we accumulate, but by what we give away." Their final toast captured everything. Isabella clinked her mug against his. "To the understanding that every person we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about, and our job is simply to be kind." As they sipped their coffee, the same bitter, perfect blend that had started it all, both knew they had discovered life's most profound secret, that true success isn't about climbing higher, but about lifting others up. The story that began with desperation had become a testament to hope. The Sunrise Diner still operated in Houston, now designated as a historical landmark. A bronze plaque by the door read, "Where compassion met opportunity, and the world became a little brighter." Isabella Martinez's story teaches us that we never know the true impact of a single act of kindness. Her compassion wasn't a transaction, it was a reflection of her character. She didn't give because she expected returns, she gave because it was who she was, even when she had nothing left. And that made all the difference in the world. The smallest gesture can unlock destinies we never knew were waiting. In a world that often feels cold and divided, Isabella proved that one person armed with empathy can change everything. The question isn't whether you can afford to be kind, it's whether you can afford not to be. What act of kindness will you perform today?